Welcome back to Solutionary TV. I am your host, Dr. Tatiana. I am thrilled to be able to report that we have heard your call. We have definitely taken into account what has been the greatest longing in so much of solutions-based programming regarding all of our global issues. And we are starting a brand new series in a conjunction with Solutionary TV, referred to the first week of July and going as long as need be as the Ascension series. It is going to be an intimate dialogue. It's going to allow us to be able to share. We will be opening up the call lines. We will be opening up the chat room. And we want you to engage with us. This is an intimate dialogue around a topic that's probably the most important thing we could possibly be talking about. And so tonight we are going to bridge the gap into more of that dialogue with some intimate sharing with our guest that I am really excited to introduce, a wonderful gentleman and someone who has a lot to be able to embellish regarding this discussion. Frank Chille Jr. is a self-proclaimed seeker of arcane knowledge for over the past 45 years. As a student of metaphysics and ancient civilizations and comparative religions, he has firsthand knowledge of little-known contactee experiences and unpublished manuscripts. He's had the exposure of advanced technology and products and has traveled extensively throughout the United States and living abroad. He's intimately connected with civilian and military contactees and is actively instrumental in ushering in this current shift in human evolution we commonly refer to as the Ascension event. We have him on audio. Are you there with us, Frank? Welcome to our show.
Welcome. It's a pleasure to be able to join you and your audience this evening.
Oh, my goodness. This has just been a while coming. We have had the opportunity for our viewing audience to banter back and forth and share a little bit, because once you really get involved in this type of community, you're introduced by all the right people. It's as if Providence moves and, the universe is aligned, and that's kind of how Frank and I were introduced. Frank, let's talk about where you are really focused on some of these topics. You've got so much to share. We could go on for hours, but you really are an insider to the insiders in terms of contactees, and there's so much beautiful information around what some of, as you understand it, our star brothers and sisters have in terms of a message for us as they're kind of holding us and guiding us through this transition. Where can we start, Frank?
Boy, I guess we could start by some of the influential people that I've met in life. One of them is somebody that we both knew very well, Roberta Herzog, who helped me to understand the greater meaning of what my work was here. And she was a very, very fine clairvoyant, actually a metaphysician, and she was a Kabbalist. She was a very fine spirit writer, and she was able to read the Akashic records probably better than anyone I've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have to go into trance. She would be just sitting there and shift consciousness, and she'd be at the records room with Abu Kashgar. And Abu Kashgar would deliver to her the information that was needed for that individual for the what they needed to know for this life's purpose and this life's mission. And Roberta would share that information with the individuals, and she had performed this service throughout most of her life. And she lived on a farm in upstate Pennsylvania in a place called Wyalusing Rocks, which is 500 feet above the Susquehanna River. And the rocks jut out, and the Indians would use it as prayer rocks for sunrise and sunset services. And the whole area is highly charged. They had bought it from the Girl Scouts had originally owned that property, and they had bought it from Native American Indians, and her husband, Nicholas Herzog, and herself were, they had gotten married. They were originally from Philadelphia, and they were driving up along Route 6, and when they got to the crest of this hill, the wheel was taken out of Nicky's hands, and took them to the top of the mountain, and they saw these cottages and log cabins that had been left there by the Girl Scouts, and they knew that they were to be there, and they made an offer for the property, and they purchased the property, and Nikki and Roberta lived there, and Roberta would do her paintings there. She would do her Akashic Records work there. She would also do jewelry design, and a mutual friend introduced Roberta and I together. And at the time, I was married, and this metaphysician by the name of Richard Parsons said, "Frank, there's an extraordinary couple I need to introduce you to. Can you get away for the weekend?" And I asked my wife at the time, Donna, and she was understanding of it. She knew that I was pursuing an interest in metaphysics and that I was meeting some remarkable people. And so I went up for the weekend, and on the way up, Dick Parsons told me, he said, "Frank, I have to tell you, these are both vegetarian people, and do you have any problem with that?" I said, "No, none whatsoever." So he introduced me to Roberta Herzog as an interesting person, and I found her to be exquisitely profound. And we shared wonderful times together. I told her of having gone through Dianetics and having been introduced to the precepts of Scientology by a professor who had gone through Scientology with Gene Roddenberry in England. And he had told me that the precepts for Star Trek were based upon the precepts of Dianetics, of the analytical mind, the reactive mind, and the balanced mind, and how the three major players in that series were divined off of that. And Roberta was a real Trekkie. She was really into it. So we had some great discussions about that. And she was very interested in hearing about Valiant Thor. I told her of having been introduced to the From Outer Space book about Howard Menger and his experience in northern New Jersey with having met the beings before World War, well, actually as a young man, about 5 or 6 years of age. And I didn't know anything about that story whatsoever, but one day I was driving along a major thoroughfare here in New Jersey, and I was drawn to go into the parking lot into a bookstore I'd never been into before. And I walked up and down the aisle of books, and I stopped in front of the metaphysical section of books, and this one book started vibrating towards me like it wanted me to pick it up. And it happened to be that book From Outer Space, which talked about Howard Menger having met the beings as a young boy and meeting this beautiful woman who had long blonde hair and blue eyes and was wearing like a white gown. And she told him as a little boy that he had volunteered to come here during this incarnation, and that when he grew older, that his space family would be working with him. And this is a boy 5 years of age, and he went home and told his parents about it. And of course, they said they thought it was something that was just a young boy's fanciful imagination.
Right.
Well, he grew up, and the United States was involved in war, and he got drafted, and he was going through training in Texas. And one night after getting done with his daily activities, he was walking back to his barracks, and he happened to see somebody walking towards him in uniform. And as soon as the person passed him, he recognized the energy as being the same energy as the woman he had met as a small boy. And he turned around and he said, "You're one of them." And he said, "Yes." And he said, "You're going to be severely challenged and tested, but never lose your faith and trust in God, and we will meet again." So he was sent to the Pacific, and he had almost lost his life in several of the battles, and he remembered never to lose faith and trust in God, and he was able to persevere. And at the end of the war, he went back home to Highbridge, New Jersey, and became a sign painter. And one night after work, he was drawn to go out into this field on the way home, and a ship landed, and the beings introduced themselves to him again, and he started interacting with them. And they had long hair, before it was very customary for men to have hair down to their shoulders, and he would cut their hair, get them earth clothes, and take them to like Boston or Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., to do whatever work they needed to do. Then he started sharing with him some of their cosmic principles, and they asked him to share them with neighbors who may be interested in this. And he decided to have outdoor sessions at his home in Highbridge, New Jersey. And during this one event in 1957, he had a gathering of people there, and there was a photographer who had been a photographer during the Second World War by the name of August C. Roberts, who was very much into UFOs, wanted to be there for Howard's event and took these photographs. And there were 4 people at this event who were not from here. One was Valiant Thor, one was his spiritual brother by the name of Dom Thor, another one was a blonde-haired woman by the name of Jill, and there was another brunette by the name of Elsie. And these photographs were taken and they were published. And the photographs are remarkable photographs. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but
Where were, Frank, if you don't mind me interrupting, for our viewing audience, can you tell them the origins of these space brothers and what their message was?
well, they were from Venus, and Valiant Thor was an ambassador who had asked to be of service to help in the evolutionary consciousness raising of the planet Earth. And he petitioned for this job, and the hierarchy gave him this task. And he's based out of Venus, and he works with beings from Venus who look exactly like us, and they're dedicated to the upliftment of mankind. And their program is something that has been ongoing probably for the last several hundred years, but really got into a much higher gear starting in the 50s.
Okay. So I know that there is a lot more dialogue we could do just about the understanding that
Valiant Thor and them,
Thor.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, there was some petitioning of members of our government and highly influential people in places that could have made a difference that apparently did not take place. That's my understanding. Is that correct, Frank?
Yes, and he actually lived at the Pentagon for a period of 3 years, offering to share information to overcome disease, overcome aging, overcome problems that we're suffering here. And all that the military really wanted from him was how his craft operated, how his spacesuit had the ability to repel laser beams, and how he was able to go back and forth basically effortlessly, change from one vibration to another.
They were more interested in what it was monetizable and what could be crafted to benefit in any type of a military operation. And it's so disappointing when you consider you have this potentially fifth, sixth dimensional being that is saying, hey, we're just further along in our evolution and we've got, an opportunity to bring this to you if you're willing to embrace it and be able to really incorporate from a holistic place what humanity was meant to graduate into quite a while ago. And we've really had a long drag on this, haven't we, Frank?
We certainly have. But the fulfillment and the fruition of it is at hand.
I believe that, and I want to take that discussion much deeper, and we definitely will. Let's talk a little bit about how beautifully the universe aligns in a mosaic, the right people. But prior to our audience being able to join us, you and I were talking about the connection that you made between Roberta Herzog and Chille Winkler. Let's talk about what happened and how they both had these fascinating encounters with beings that they both had done some art renditions. Let's go ahead and start with that connection.
Yes.
Right.
When I moved out to California, I had an opportunity to relocate, and Simon, my spiritual brother, who I'd been introduced to by Roberta, had gotten out there first. He was drawn to go out to the Integratron and work with George Van Tassel and his wife Doris in designing the buildings that were going to be part of the College of Universal Wisdom there, and that's a whole other area we can go into. But anyway, when I moved out to California, I got a chance to meet Gabriel Green, who was a photographer also during the war, and he became the official photographer for all the Giant Rock UFO conventions out there. And his home was like a museum of contactee information, photographs, just extraordinary things. So we would go out there, Simon and I, maybe 2 or 3 times a month and spend weekends there. So we went out there and we had met Chille Winkler through Gabriel Green. She had been an animation artist for the Disney Studios for about 40 years, and she was a Buddhist, and when she retired, she joined this retreat in Yucca Valley, a Buddhist retreat. She lived in a cottage that was probably about no more than 500 or 600 square feet, very, very modest, and she was very much into metaphysics, into the cosmic nature of our family. And each morning at sunrise, there would be the first shaft of light that would come in through a window by her front door, and a being would materialize, fully physical, and stand there motionless until Chille could capture their likeness in oil. And she would paint their portrait and then ship it to two friends of hers who lived in Northern California in Grass Valley, and he had a retreat called the Manka Retreat, which was named after one of the space beings, Manka, who was also on Earth as an incarnated, he had incarnated here as the feathered serpent. He was called the feather serpent, but he wasn't a serpent, he was a man. And after he went through his incarnation in his work here, he went back to his title of Manka, and he told Siema White Dove name to procure this property in Grass Valley, which they did, and they called it the Manka Retreat, and they published a newsletter where they received messages from these space beings, and Celaya would paint these portraits and send them to Grass Valley, and the cover of their newsletter would have one of the portraits that Celaya had painted for the month. So they had this gallery of all these individuals who had appeared to Celaya, and when Simon and I went up to visit Sam and White Dove, we were shown the gallery, and I wept upon seeing it, Dr. Tatiana, because it was like looking into a gallery of family members, and I recognized.
Wow, and, so powerful, Frank. Was it kind of an all-inclusive thing, or did you notice that you were particularly drawn to just some of the individuals that you had a marriage of interdimensional connection with?
I seem to recognize all of them, and the one that Celaya did of Helios.
Yes.
My God, when I saw that, I wept. My knees were buckling. I just couldn't believe the energy.
I was very taken with Helios. Out of all of them, that was the most compelling for me. It's fascinating you should say that. And yes. I want to tell our viewers, go to the Facebook page that we have for Solutionary TV, where we do a lot of our marketing. With Frank's permission, I would like to be able to show whatever paintings are within your rights to be able to allow them to see, because the activation in looking into the eyes, like you said, their eyes were living, they were beckoning, They were so soulful. You're just going to have to let us know if that's something that we can actually provide them, because I'm sure that many would enjoy that activation.
I would also say too that after Helios, the portrait of Maitreya also was. It took my breath away. I just opened my heart chakra seeing that. And I could just imagine her being in the presence of Maitreya and painting these. But I will say this to you, the portrait of Haton that shows him with a blue star kind of radiating down on Mount Shasta, there was a contactee that Gabriel Green knew, who Gabriel Green had asked this contactee if it would be possible to give one of the Space Brothers a camera, a 35mm camera, and take photographs that can be shared. And he was given the okay. So the fellow got a 35mm camera and several rolls of film, and he gave it to his friend, and his friend was granted permission to go to Haton's home planet called Terminus Haton, and he's record keeper of the galaxy, and took these extraordinary photos that to this day, they're burned into my consciousness. They're just absolutely incredible photographs of Haton's home planet and his work and how he keeps vigilance on the galaxy, and how the records are stored in cylinders that look to be like stainless steel. I could do like almost a whole program talking about those photographs, but again, these are things that we were able to see when we would go and visit with Gabriel Green, and we would meet these contactees and be shown information that I never thought in my wildest imagination I would ever be part of or have access to. So we got Roberta to come out to California, and we took her to visit Celaya Winkler, and they bonded immediately. And Roberta was just so captivated by how humble Celaya was, and both of them were able to share techniques in both oils and watercolor, and Roberta would also do colored pencil. And it was interesting. Roberta wore a caftan that was like a rainbow color, and Celaya was very, very taken by it, and Roberta picked up on that. So she gave the caftan to Celaya, and Celaya gave her an ancient prayer wheel from Tibet to take home with her. And they formed just a really, really tight bond. And when we could bring Roberta to the desert, we would bring her to meet with Celaya. It was always a wonderful, wonderful experience. And as you know, Roberta was also talented as an artist, and she knew that we would go and visit with Sister Thedra, who was one of 2 women that were allowed to go through the Monastery of the Seven Rays above Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. And Sister Thedra was one, and the other one was Chille, a woman I mentioned to you before we went on air. And I got a chance to meet both of these women. Both of them knew that the other had gone through the Monastery of Seven Rays, and they were aware that they were only one of 2 females ever allowed to go through it. When Sister Thedra went through it, she went through it with George Hunt Williamson, and he wrote a book about his experiences here under the name of Brother Philip, and it was called Secret of the Andes. Well, Simon and I would go to visit Sister Thedra, and we had seen a photograph that was very rare that was taken of Madame Blavatsky with the 3 masters, Kutumi, Almoria, and Saint Germain. It had been taken in 1895, and we asked Sister Thedra about this photograph. And she told me that a woman contacted her in New Zealand who had this original portrait, and it's very rare, and said that I was told by my inner guidance that you should have it, Sister Thedra, but I cannot mail this to you, that you need to come to New Zealand and I have to personally hand this to you for you to take back. And she did. And it's a remarkable photograph. I know you haven't seen it, Dr. Tatiana, but I will make it available to you and you can share it with your audience.
Oh, thank you. Yes, please.
It's really extraordinary. So I asked Sister Thedra if I could make copies of it, and I made 2 copies, one for Roberta, and I framed it, and one to Chille, and I'll talk about Chille a little bit later. But when Simon and I presented it to Roberta, we said, this is an old family photograph, and she burst out in tears. She could not believe that she was actually seeing this. And we told her that it was a gift from Sister Thedra. So she said, well, I have to do something for Sister Thedra. So she didn't announce what she was going to do, but she painted this incredible portrait of Christ singing, okay? And it is just lyrical to even look at it. You could almost hear the Master singing in this portrait. So she wanted Simon and I to hand deliver it to Sister Thedra, and she said, I cannot risk mailing this. This is something that's very, very special. So Simon and I went out to Mount Shasta, and we went to visit Sister Thedra, and we gave her this portrait. And she opened it up, Dr. Tatiana, and she started to weep. She said, when the Master Jesus appears to her, and she said he comes in through the window on a beam of light, he appears, and she said he looks exactly like this. Oh. And she said she never thought she'd see such a rendition as this. And before Simon and I had gotten there, she would take walks in the afternoon on the mountain on the opposite end of Shasta, opposite from Panther Meadow. And she said there was a part of the mountain she would go to, and she said there was a fairy ring that was about 6 feet in diameter. And she said there'd be divas and fairies and nature sprites there. And she said they were like 3 and 4 inches tall, and they would put together a little campfire and dance around the campfire, and there'd be miniature unicorns that were maybe 3 or 4 inches tall. And she said they put on this little dance for her, and at the end of the dance, they brought her a bouquet that they had picked of Shasta sage, and they had a beautiful ribbon around it, and they gave it to her. And when she saw the portrait that Roberta had given her, she wanted to give a gift back to Roberta, so she gave us this bouquet of Shasta sage to take back to Roberta. But she said, please hand it to her. Do not mail this to her. And we said, no, we wouldn't mail it to her. We would take it to her. Roberta was just so overjoyed when she saw it, and she never broke the bouquet because the ribbon that it was tied with by the elementals and the fairies was just so beautiful. She just kept it intact. It was just really, really extraordinary stuff. We talk about these things as if they're science fiction. These are realities. These things actually happened, okay?
Mm-hmm. I think that the reason, Frank, is that we don't have the benefit, as you know, because of the contrived establishment that we happen to live in, and that we are very often influenced by. We are allowed beautiful science fiction and gorgeous, literary writing and mythology and such amazing, epic films that depict these types of things. And I think every single human being that's drawn to them has a sense of remembering and has a sense of longing and familiarity with it. But there is this cutoff, this very rigid place that we are redirected to, that says you can wish for it, you can desire for it, but that is just a mythological concept, and maybe something you can experience if you believe in an eternal soul. What is it, do you believe, Frank, given the beauty and the continuity of what you have shared and those that are experiencing this regularly? What is the difference between the energy that they are cultivating and maintaining that's welcoming these experiences into their lives and allowing them to be able to dance between the veils, and then the average person that's part of our society?
I think the openness and letting go of the ego, because all those that I've met in this work, the most profound revelations that they had was when they let go of the ego, and it's letting go of the ignorance.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty
And
succinct,
that's a
isn't
test.
it?
That's a test. That's a real test.
Yes, well, it is, because we identify with a construct of self, but these vehicles that I like to say we're riding in, these vehicles that are the ego, are the body, are the identity, the reputation, the pedigree. But the truth of the matter is that we're so much more than this third dimensional avatar that we're riding in. And it sounds, if I understand you correctly, Frank, and the beautiful stories of, Chille and Roberta and so many others that you've mentioned, they are resting comfortably in this sort of interdimensional awareness that they are experiencing realities simultaneously in the ever-present now that are not relegated exclusively to that 3D that they're projecting from.
That's right. But they volunteered to be here, to be part of that awareness and be part of that nudging into conscious awareness. And they did a lot of that work that's still ongoing.
So what is that message? I mean, when we consider the collation of these amazing star beings that have come down and were willing to have their literally oil painting. I once oil painted. I know what kind of patience that endeavor, undergoes to be able to layer that quickly. They were willing to be painted and photographed, and gifts were exchanged. What was their message for us, Frank, as you've understood it?
They wanted us to be able to recognize them, that when that time comes, when they could reveal themselves openly, that we'll recognize who they are. That's what they wanted.
I am excited about the idea of having some of these photographs made available so that we can help those in our viewing audience that are interested in being activated. And this is a real thing. I mean, as an experiencer, as an intuitive, as an author, as a speaker, but more importantly, as an experiencer, because really that's what it's about. Everything else is a layer to the character. It's about direct personal witness and experience. We can be activated by a phrase, by a tone of voice, by a note being strung, and by the look in the eyes of some beautiful being in a painting. And it can be immediate, can't it, Frank? It can be such a powerful transition.
I've had people tell me that upon looking or meditating upon some of these images, the levels of forgetfulness has left the person, and they become aware of a greater sense of being and a greater sense of purpose and a greater sense of cosmic unity.
I have no doubt.
That's the message.
I'm sorry?
I think that's part of the message.
I believe it is too, and I want to address, for those that have suffered with the financial beating down of our broken and very non-regenerative systems, those that are suffering because of how the earth has been abused and made toxic, and recognize that the burdens that have been placed on humanity, because we're still dealing with so many inefficient, very dirty energy systems that profit very few and burden the masses. Tell us a little bit about these systems that were being brought to us from these interdimensional beings, and how they were hoping that they would bless humanity if we had just been more developed to embrace them when they first began to arrive.
Well, this is a very unique story. At the time, I had relocated to Southern California. I was drawn to go into this industrial park that I'd never been in before. And I was driving around, and I saw the name on the side of this building called Solara Electronics. And I was drawn immediately to the building because that name resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into the building, and there was a young fellow in there by the name of Brian. And I said, "Brian, is this your firm?" He said, "No, it's my father's firm." And I said, "Well, what does your dad do?" And he said, "It's kind of complicated." And he said, "My dad's not here now. He'll be back after 5 o'clock. It may be better if you came back after 5 o'clock. And I said, "Sure, that sounds good." I said, "I'll definitely come back." Came back after 5 o'clock, and this very gentle but tall fella whose energy was just exquisite smiled and walked over to me when I walked into the building, and he said, "I'm George Fiedler." George Fiedler. And he said, "I understand from my son Brian you had been here earlier." And I said, "Yes." And I introduced myself to him, and I said, "George, I am drawn to the name of this building. I came in here." I said, "I wanted to know more about what you were doing here." And I said, "Do you mind me asking you?" And he said, "No, not at all." And he said, "Let me give you a little bit of a background." He said, "I was a senior engineer at National Cash Register," and he got involved in metaphysics and read all the Alice Bailey teachings. And he said that was a real test and a challenge to read the Alice Bailey works and to be cognizant of what she was sharing. And he said after he finished reading them, he was in meditation, and he said, he asked if he could be of service. And he said, when he asked that, immediately the being Joakul appeared to him and said, "I would like to be of service to you in your endeavor." And George he recognized who Joakul was. And Joakul said that we want you to work with a process regarding helping to free the planet of contaminants, herbicides, pesticides, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I want you to be aware that we're going to assign somebody to work with you directly on this." And the person that was brought in was a female space being by the name of Solara. And I said, "George, that's where I know that name from." I said, "There's a contactee who had an experience with a female space being by the name of Solara. He did not have a photo of her, but he did a line drawing of how she looked, and I shared it with George, and George said, 'That's how Solara looks.'" And he said, "I was so taken by her willingness to work with us, I named the company after her." And what this device was, and Solara helped him with this, is the device was maybe about 18 inches in diameter and about 9 inches high, and it was copper wire that was configured in a very specific configuration. It was powered by 9-volt battery, and what it would do is it would amplify the energy grid of the planet, okay, and it created a specific field that would prevent mice, rats, any type of rodents that would eat crops from affecting the crops. It would stop grasshoppers, it would stop locusts, but it had no effect on butterflies or ladybugs or earthworms or rabbits or anything like that. What it would do, it would cause the insects to implode and turn into dust, and for rats and rodents, they would dehydrate and they would just pass in this field. And it would generate an energy that you could feel that was palpable. And George started one of them up, and he said, "Palm your hands together and then tell me what you feel coming off of it." I could feel waves of energy coming off of this device. And he called it a nature shield. So he started making them, and he started selling them to grain elevators. He was advertising in farm journals, and where they were having problems with rats and rodents. He sold 4 of them to Disneyland. They were using them in Disneyland to control rodents. And then he saw an article in the paper that the Library of Congress was being attacked by rats. They were being drawn to the glue, the bindings of the books.
Right.
So George contacted the Library of Congress, and he said, "I think I have a solution for the problem without using herbicides or pesticides." And he said, "I did some calculations, and the building would need 4 of these devices." And he sent them down, and he said, "If they don't function within 90 days, just send them back. Well, he got a letter from Senator William Proxmire. He showed me the letter, and they sent him a check within 3 weeks. They had solved the problem within 3 weeks.
Amazing. What happened to this groundbreaking technology? This is something.
Well, it became too successful. Not the pharmaceutical, but the agricultural industry, the chemical industry, started seeing that there was a drop-off of herbicides and pesticides that were being purchased by their clients, and they were asking, "What were you using instead of using the herbicides and pesticides?" And they said they're using this Nature Shield, and apparently they exerted pressure on the Department of Agriculture to see if they could prevent this from becoming more widespread, because George was having success with every one of these that he was putting out there. They were used at the docks in New Orleans to control the rodents here that were trying to get onto the ships that were delivering produce and things like that. I mean, they really worked.
How long were they in business, Frank?
He was in business probably about maybe 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And they came in and they said, "We need to do a study of your product to see whether or not it works." Now, when George made these, they had to be either on the ground or partially in the ground, maybe about 4 inches into the ground.
So they needed to be grounded and anchored because they were copper-based and they had a grounding capacity.
No, they needed to be in contact with the magnetic grid of the planet to
Okay.
be able to amplify that energy. So they had to be at ground level. So he told that to the Department of Agriculture, and they said they were going to run tests on it for something like 60 days. Well, they came back after 60 days, and they said they had put them on the shelf next to cages of rats and rodents and locusts and grasshoppers, and nothing happened to them. So what they did was they hit him with a cease and desist. So he had to stop. He could not manufacture any more of these. And Joaquin and Solara had given him devices that would also clean the air and also clean water using the same principle. They had given him plans for one that could work from horizon to horizon. And Joaquin, after they saw what they did to George, said, since they refused it, they shall be denied it. And George had used all his family fortune to put into this business, and his wife and his children were not into any aspect of this, and he was basically ostracized from his family for what had happened because it had failed.
You hear these tragic stories, Frank, when you look at, Dr. Rife and the Rife microscope and the fact that he had once fully analyzed 100% success at being able to use the technology that ultimately is nothing more than vibration and frequency, creating resonance with healthy cells as opposed to cancer cells, and cancer cells moving at a different frequency, more erratic, and applying the microscope at the intentional resonance of a healthy cell, whatever that target cell needed to be, whether it had been in the spleen or if it had been in the bone marrow, and 100% success in eradication. And what happens? The government institutions, the AMA, the USDA, whatever it happens to be, comes in and seizes equipment and does arrests and burns documents. And we hear this so much throughout human history that once these advances are made, many are familiar with Nikola Tesla having so many clean energy devices that are only now starting to emerge, that have been, patented and demonstratable, but suppressed, always suppressed. What is currently being stated by our still very present, are still very vocal and lovingly in contact space brothers and sisters about moving past these old restraints of power brokers that have been dominating the masses for so long?
Well, you and your audience may recognize this, that both China and India have said that as of 2020, they're no longer going to be manufacturing gasoline engines. Everything's going to be total electric. And a U.S. inventor had recently developed a new type of battery that could have a range of 340 miles, and the battery could be recharged in less than 2 minutes. That is going to have a tremendous effect on ushering in this era of electric vehicles. And you may have also noticed this too, that there's becoming a greater sense of disclosure regarding information that's coming out that's basically being released by the Navy. The Navy has been behind a lot of the secrecy regarding the visitors and the craft. They set the Air Force up as the straw man in this to make everybody look in the direction of the Air Force, but it's really the Navy who's been controlling things, and they've been releasing footage of F-16 and F-18 jets that have taken photographs, daylight photographs of the saucers, and they've been releasing this information. As I understand, there's a nucleus of physicists that are working behind the scenes that are going to be validating information that's going to be released to the public regarding the technology. And the technology incorporates not only the metallurgical aspects of it, but also consciousness and awareness. And the information that's going to be released is going to be indicating that the visitors themselves are piloting craft that use consciousness and awareness, and they use that to get from one place to the other. The fastest thing, faster than light, is thought. If we think of the furthest part in the solar system, we're there instantly. If we think of the furthest part in the galaxy, we're there instantly.
Right, which is exactly what near-death experiencers will share. I mean, I've had a depth of research and personal witness with those that have been friends as well as colleagues and referral partners of mine that have had near-death experiences. And they'll come back after their extraordinary journey into the hereafter and share that once we're free of the shackles of the body and the limitation of the weight, you know, the WEIGHT of the body, the density that we live in these in these vehicles that we ride in, and the WAIT, the wait time from a thought to a manifestation, is completely instantaneous. No more of this delay in terms of manifestation. Does that resonate with you in terms of what you just mentioned?
Absolutely true. Yes, absolutely true. And a friend of mine who's a physicist who's kind of linked in with these people, and Deepak Chopra is part of that nucleus. I asked him, I said, who is pushing this behind the scenes? Take a guess who's pushing it.
I'm open. I mean, I know we just had disclosure with To the Stars Academy back in December, and members of the DoD and the Pentagon and Lockheed Martin Skunk Works that have admitted that we have repressed technologies, and they're trying to get the public to donate towards their funds so that they can start to make them available, because there is no private funding. And you know, the black projects that have taken trillions of dollars of the taxpayers' money has not been released to us. But I'm assuming you've got information we don't have. Please tell our viewers who's behind it.
The visitors.
Okay.
They're pushing it. Roberta would tell me, and Callie would tell me, every time they looked up into the sky, they said, Frank, we can't even see the sky. It is so filled with craft that the veil is so close to revealing itself that our cosmic family is going to be introducing themselves to us, and we're going to walk with these individuals. I've said this to you offline, that I've spoken to women around the country who've told me that their DNA has already been quickened, that they're aware of who they are. They're spending 60 to 80% of their waking time now, their aware time, in the reality of what it is we're going to be experiencing. The 20 to 40% that they're spending in this consciousness, they said they're just going through the motions, or just marking time. And they said they can't share it with their husbands and their boyfriends. They don't understand it. None of these women know each other. I'm the common point that they share this information with, because they know they could share this with me without judgment and unconditionally. And I accept it from them as it's being given to me. And everyone tells me the same thing, Dr. Tatiana. They said the fulfillment is real. There's no pain. There's no disappointment. Everything is the reality of what it is that we're all about. And there's nothing to be apprehensive about. And the rest of us are going to be meeting that juncture very quickly. And every one of them used this expression to me. They said it's going to happen within the twinkling of an eye. Every one of them have said that to me.
You know, I really follow this. This has been my lifelong passion, because I was born maybe more awake than many and always knew this is what I was here for. I was here for this ascension event and for this massive awakening. And I think just a return to the truthfulness of who we are and you hear the classic phrase, who we are, why we're here, where we're going. I think it's so much more simple than that. It is an all-inclusiveness of we are a fractalized aspect of divinity experiencing this particular iteration, experiencing this multi-dimensional universe as multi-dimensional beings. And perhaps what is so exciting is that those of us that are getting kind of a front seat or a frontline introduction to it before the masses is we're starting to integrate these multi-dimensional aspects of ourselves now, so that we can be prepared as the Earth moves through this great, solar year, this 26,000 year cycle, and the rest of humanity steps into what could be really wonky and challenging to integrate. Many of us have needed to be prepared before that. And so I resonate with those women. I understand we can't say this to everyone. I'm one of the bold or the overly humble and egoless that's willing to get on a show and talk about this, because there's no more time to pretend like we are merged in with the mainstream. It's really, really high time. And I think that those that are awakened in society and those that are yearning to be awake are looking for formats like this, media outlets like this, where we're not only talking about the fact that it's happening, but how are we personally navigating it? So I would ask, given your being in confidence with some of these other awakened men and women, maybe particularly women, what would you say is the key piece that they are sharing with you now about how that awakening is ushering in for them a greater sense of integration, so that we can help our viewers right now to be knowing what to look for and to have a little bit more compassion for themselves?
They tell me that when they've learned the totality of who they are, it is so entirely humbling, and it's so fulfilling all at once. And they see that there's no limitation to themselves. I have used the analogy that we are as a diamond, and this level of awareness or consciousness may be reflecting through one facet of that diamond, but it doesn't mean that we're not also reflecting through other aspects of that diamond at the same time.
Beautiful. And, I would just kind of chime in my meditations and having experiences that are very similar, perhaps quite mirrored to these women that you've mentioned. It has been made really clear to me that it is just where we are focusing. If we were to return to the absolute right now, to the infinite, where everything exists, every perception, every individuation of that divinity is nothing more than focusing on and spinning down into a fractalized view that's almost like an address. It's like a point in time. It's a point on the grid. And when you're focused there, then you clothe that in maybe a degree of materiality, and then you clothe that further through the DNA makeup and the memory and belief systems and perceptions of our ancestry, and then you clothe that further in the density that we take on as individuals in the life that we have. And sometimes we clothe so heavily, don't we, Frank, that we actually believe the lie that I am only this person in this physical body. And it is a complete veil. It's a complete forgetfulness, isn't it?
That's a distraction and a barrier, and we have to let that pass. We have to let go of that. A very astute woman told me just to be aware of what's going on around us, but don't allow it to break your focus from moving forward, because there's tons of distractions out there. God knows there's no shortage, but I really feel that we're watching The Last Dance of the Tyrants, and that the musical chairs is ending, and they're running out of music and they're running out of chairs.
Hopefully they're also running out of participants who don't want to play the game anymore. I'm definitely one of them. I have opted out. So let's kind of touch back on where are we in this great ascension event. You have been collating data for such a long time, talking to experts. What is being said about this prep time at this point in human history, Frank?
I feel that the time frame has been so accelerated that we're beyond the cusp. I really think that we're functioning more at higher dimensional levels than we're aware of. I seem to be getting more and more recall of doing things at other dimensions and seeing and talking to people that I know here, but actively interacting with them at other levels. And when I see them at this level, I want to continue the dialogue with them. But Dr. Tatiana, something tells me, don't say anything to them yet. They're not yet aware of that.
Right.
But very, very close. Very
Well,
close.
there's a huge amount of respectfulness for everyone's process. Divinity
That's right.
allows everything. I mean, we know that the greatest and most glorious aspects of being alive and being embodied are revered and certainly part of the spectrum. But just
Yes.
as much so, the greatest depravity and debauch and pain and abysmal darkness is also allowed as part of this creative experience. And it's, where do you want to put your energy? Where do you want your focus to be? For those
That's
that
right.
are hopeless, stop looking at hopelessness. For those
That's
that
right.
are angry with the current system, stop being angry with the current systems. Start creating, just as this gentleman did, just as many hopeful dreamers have come and gone before us. There needs to be that keen eye on the trajectory onward and forward by being that, by embodying that, and by staying open to that. Wouldn't you agree, Frank?
I would agree totally. I shared this story with Roberta, and I'll share it with you and your audience. There was a time when Roberta was really kind of down because things were not progressing properly, and she was really, I mean, she was ready to give the masters what for.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I say that very lovingly. And I said, Roberta, I said, I have to share a story with you of a person who was a contactee, and he was working with a group of star beings, and nothing was working out. And he got so frustrated with everything that was not working out. And this one day he came home after a very unfruitful day, and he said, I've had it. I'm fed up. And he went into the bathroom, and he got a towel, and he threw the towel up in the air as symbolic that he didn't want any more to do with any of this. So he sat down in his easy chair, and he was huffing and puffing. He was beside himself. So when his mind became a little more calm, a little more quiet, he heard this voice say to him, Commander, we're just following the plan you had outlined for us before you came down into this incarnation, and the sure plan that we're following right now.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, we can retool the plan, can't we? Isn't that the beauty of
Yes, we
free will?
can. We
This is a
can.
free will
Yes,
universe, right?
that's
Okay.
right. If one avenue doesn't work, you could work in another avenue. There's
Mm-hmm.
no limit to our creativity and to be able to solve problems and get things done.
Mm-hmm.
They've never tired. Our space friends have never tired. Our cosmic family, the golden helmeted ones, which I love calling them, they've never tired of this. And look how many rejections and how many frustrations they've had.
Yeah, the golden helmeted ones. That was a term. We've just got a minute, maybe a hair longer. Explain how they came about getting this glorious title, Frank. I think that this is really a nice context for our viewers.
Well, that's how they appear to me, as golden helmeted beings of light that have volunteered to come here, as we volunteered to come here. We've come into the trenches to do the hard work, but they are there supporting us. We may feel alone, but we may feel lonely, but we're never alone. Their energy is always around us, and I feel their inspiration all the time. And to me, they glow as if they're wearing a golden helmet.
So, for our viewers that have had maybe a beckoning or an internal awareness, an awakening, a rekindling of that memory, and they're looking to call in some of these experiences, it feels ripe and correct for them. How
Yes.
would you how would you advise them, given the vast numbers of individuals you've spoken to that had such a regular contact that really embellished their lives so profusely? What would that step look like, Frank?
I would say that they need to choose a path that they feel an inner prompting to, and meditate on that and ask for the guidance and direction to fulfill what it is that they're here to complete or to be about. And they'll draw others to themselves that'll be supportive of this, because we didn't come into this without outlining or creating a network to help put this tapestry together. The tapestry is being woven. Each one of us are weaving a part of this tapestry, and all of us will take our place on the stage before the curtain rises to be able to share and partake of what it is that we provided for others and cooperating others in achieving.
Have they given you any hint about some key things to be looking at in terms of timelines? And just i.e., to preface, last week we had the Earth Watchman, and this is a gentleman that's just been very devoted to paying attention to the subtle changes that are both cosmic and global. Some of the
Yes.
ways with which, the magnetic shifts or magnetic poles or additional magnetospheres may be having an effect on some of the earth changes and the rising of the tides and the changing of currents. There was a lot involved in that. And so we know that a lot of people are looking for the sign of the times, or they're paying attention to some things that appear to be disclosure, that appear to be maybe greater harmonization between previously warring nation states. What have you been advised that we should be paying attention to, just to kind of not get to that stuck place that Roberta got to, where she was just ready to give them the what for? We're all looking for hope. So what should we be paying attention to
I think the signs that we're seeing in regards to climate, the first 7 weeks of this year, they said that the temperature in Antarctica was 54 to 56 degrees. It was colder in the city of Philadelphia than it was in Antarctica, which is very unusual. And the Weather Channel, I happened to see a special where they said this is the first time that the Arctic ice shelf was not one continuous mass. It was broken up into much smaller pieces. And I heard on the BBC that they did, every year they do a study on the amount of ice at the Arctic Circle, and they said this year 1 million square kilometers of ice is gone, which is about the size of the state of Texas. So all these things are signs and indications that things are occurring, but they're not negative signs. They're positive signs that things are going to change. They are going to change for the better. You know, the people who are looking for doomsday and the end of the world, the doomsday and the end of the world is the end of ignorance. That's what we have to let go of.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds so freeing when you perceive it that way. And we do realize that our perception, again, if we believe that we're that very, very tiny, heavy density address that I kind of tried to create a visual around, if we're that lock and tied to I am this and this is my entire world, we can become frightened of changes in the climate. We can become frightened with, tensions between nation states. And it's our fear that for those that understand the law of attraction and we understand how creation comes about because we are co-creative beings, that we recognize it's our fear that literally attracts that very vibration that we are emanating, even if it is something we don't want. So do you have any wisdom to our viewers about how to be in alignment and co-creating with these space brothers and sisters and those that have been contacted for so long?
I would say ask for the guidance within, and it's given. When you least expect it, it is there for you. And it becomes very apparent, when you listen from within and not from without.
Oh, I agree. The amount of time I'm spending in meditation and the amount of time that my body is telling me it's got no more patience being an active, busy, go, caffeine hype kind of 3D. The whole experience of being in an awakened state is far more alive and awake in a meditative dream state than it is in a conscious state. And I beg the forgiveness of everyone around me these days for asking them the same question 2 or 3 times, because if it isn't something that resonates with where my multidimensionality is, it doesn't necessarily get stuck in a quadrant of my brain as a place that was relevant. And it's been very humbling. But Frank...
Dr. Tatiana, I want to share this with you, too.
Yes.
Several women have told me that they're seeing in the etheric the descending of incredible crystal cities. They get closer and closer to this plane of awareness. And they said they see them slowly dropping down and descending. So we're on the cusp of so many wonderful things. And the array of visitors that are coming here are from all over the galaxy, outside of the galaxy. They're here to help us celebrate. I mean, this is our graduation day, and, we chose to be here, and we're participants in this, and we should be joyful about being allowed to be able to participate in this, and just be active in that participation.
I think that many of us that have been here a long time and been doing this light warrior, light worker, and getting exasperated with the density, need that gentle, loving reminder. We chose to be here because this was going to be a celebration. It wasn't just work. It was supposed to be a grand event. And realigning that. It still will be that grand event.
It still will be that grand event.
Sure. And speaking of grand events, for those that are interested in hearing more about your wisdom, your connections, various types of advanced energies, you're going to be speaking at the Mount Shasta Conference the end of July. Do you want to direct our viewing audience to the website or more information that you may be offering,
yes,
Frank?
it's thepromiserevealed.com. Rob Potter is sponsoring this conference at the end of July, and there's going to be some incredible speakers there. You had mentioned off air about Dr. Raymond Keller and his books about Venus and the secrecy regarding Venus and what's really going on there that is so positive that the public is not aware of. A lot of these truths are going to be revealed, and I will be sharing more information about the golden helmeted ones in our image at this event, as well as some of these other little-known contactee stories that I've met of individuals that are no different than you and I, Dr. Tatiana, but they had extraordinary experiences meeting visitors that look just as we are, that are actively involved down here.
Well, and I would say that while many of them probably contracted soulfully to come here and embody and remain awake, that it is not something that's relegated exclusively to them, that it sounds very much like the very heavens are descending and beckoning all of us into a space of cooperatively reintegrating that heaven and earth, the great Merkaba, is as above, so below, and creating an Eden and a restoration that we are looking to have here and that Gaia is looking to ascend into. And it's just a matter of getting clear. Is that your objective? Are you ready to participate in this ascension involuntarily and unconsciously, or voluntarily and with great celebration and in some pretty fine company too, right, Frank?
Truly. One woman shared with me that she had been shown that when the ships are ready to reveal themselves, there's going to be this marvelous harmonic tone that's going to be emanating from the ships, and it's going to take the sword out of people's hands and out of their hearts.
Oh, well, that's beautiful. I think that is a goal that is worth meditating on and holding as an affirmation and a vision. I want to thank you, Frank, for being here with us tonight. I realize that we've gone over the hour, but it was well worth it, and we may just need to have you come back. There's a wealth of knowledge.
It would be my pleasure and
hope.
honor. It really would
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I want to say to our viewing audience, there is a reason why you're drawn to this type of wisdom and understanding, and really it is a reintegration of truths you've always known. Magic exists. The mysteries are real. The ability for us to transcend this physical density is so palpable, and it's actually moving us forward right now as we speak. The Ascension event is now. It's not in the future, it's not in the past, and it's not in someone's imagination. It is part of every single one of our inheritance. We ask you to continue to come back and share and dialogue in the Ascension series that is coming up in July. We are going to have truly intimate dialogue. We want you to call in. We want you to join our chat room and ask questions. We want you to walk away so much more fortified so that this life isn't just bearable, isn't just survival, but it really is powerfully engaging, exciting, and you get a whole new lease on what it is to be embodied at this time. We want to thank all of you that support us as patrons, as sponsors, because we are still just bridging that veil of 3D and needing to make all of the ways with which we show up for you here. So we thank you with all of our hearts, and we want to remind you that together we are the solution.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.